This is the Sports Sit Down with Mike DeMurgis.
Mike DeMurgis, along with WFAN legend Joe Benigno. Joe, thanks so much for joining us today on
You got it, Mike.
this podcast here. A day of rejoicement. Not many days come like this for Jet fans, and Joe Klecko going into the Hall of Fame this summer.
Yep.
I don't think the young generation appreciates what the Jets and Joe Klecko meant to the city in the 1980s. Very underrated, and a lot of people thought that Jets team was going to win a Super Bowl long before the Giants were.
Well, the one thing they didn't have was a quarterback. I think that's really why they never won it, to be very honest with you. Yeah, obviously the emergence of the sack exchange, especially 1981, was really the year where the sack exchange really became the sack exchange. Klecko and Gastineau dominating the way they did. They finally made the playoffs, and of course that disastrous loss to the Bills in the playoff game in '81. But with Richard Todd, as he so often did, finding the open linebacker, open defensive back, like he did against Buffalo, like he did against Miami the following year. But I thought that's what held him back. Had they drafted Marino like they should have in 1983, they would have. I don't know if they would have won a Super Bowl, Mike, because there were so many of these great NFC teams. The Niners and the Giants, the Redskins and all of that.
They would have went to a couple at least.
The Bears, the '85 Bears. There were so many of these great NFC teams, but they would have been to at least one if they would have drafted Marino for sure.
Let's talk about that 1981 season. They started off 0-3. They finished the year 10-5-1.
Yep.
And that was really the emergence of the sack exchange. Klecko had 20 and a half. Right. Gastineau had 20. Let's reminisce about that. The excitement that there was. It was must-see TV back then.
Well, it came out of nowhere. Look, they had a couple. The end of the Joe Namath era, when Namath retired and wound up going to the Rams, 77, 76, 77, whatever it was. They had a couple good years. Walt Michaels takes over. They have a couple good years. They go 8-8 in 78. They go 8-8 in 79. And everybody's like going nuts, man. This team's on its way. And then the following year, they have a disastrous season where they go 4-12, right? 4-12 in 1980 after back-to-back 8-8 years, and you thought they were really on the verge. And then here comes 81, and like you said, they start 0-3-1. Oh my God! What's going on here? And then they go on the run. Then they go on this crazy run. They win 10 out of 12 games. They had the one tie in there too with Miami. But basically, they win 10 out of 12. The only two losses, by the way, to Seattle. They played Seattle twice that year and lost to them twice. I think it was 19-3 at home, and then Dave Craig beat him in Seattle after he had taken over for Jim Zorn. Those are the only two losses they had. And then we get to the final game, and they had that great game against the Dolphins, where Richard Todd would probably
16-15. Jerome Barkham in the last seconds there.
Yep, no doubt about it.
And the finale, 81, that game against Green Bay, 28-3, 9 sacks. Shea Stadium was electric that day. That joint was jumping.
I was fortunate to be at those guys. I was at that game, the Richard Todd game against the Dolphins. I was at the Packer game. It was crazy. And, they get into the playoffs for the first time in 12 years. They hadn't been to the playoffs since '69 when they lost that. I was at that game, too, when they lost to the Chiefs 13-6 in that divisional, whatever you want to call it, playoff game to Kansas City. So it had been 12 years since they'd even been in a playoff situation. And that place was nuts. And remember this too. Remember they got the Giants in the playoffs too by them beating the Pack. Remember the Giants had beaten Dallas the day before at Giant Stadium to set themselves up. And then when the Jets beat the Packers, they not only went to the playoffs, they took the Giants in with them too. So, and it ended in, as I said, that disaster against Buffalo. They were down 30. Remember that game, that Buffalo game?
Man.
Remember the opening kickoff.
Harper fumbled the ball.
Harper fumbles the opening kickoff. It's returned for a touchdown by a guy by the name of Charles Romes. They made so many mistakes in that game. Wesley Walker dropped 2 touchdown passes. Remember the play where Gastineau sacks Joe Ferguson?
Yep, and he's doing his dance
behind him. Yep. Right? And instead of going after the ball, he's doing the sack dance. And they wind up recovering the ball. But with all that said, they're down 31-13. They come back 31-27. They got the ball. They're inside the 15-yard line in the closing
heartbreak.
And Todd throws that interception to Bill Simpson.
And that was it.
And that was it.
But yeah, that was an electric season. So, but things were
Yep.
looking positive going into 1982, the strike year.
Yep. Yep.
Jets started 1-1, and then disaster strikes when
Yep. The
Cle
strike happens,
Klecko
right?
gets the strike happens, and
Well, Klecko
Klecko
gets
gets
hurt, like you
hurt.
said. He gets hurt in that New England game. You're right about it. That's right.
Yeah,
Second game of the year. Remember, they lost to the Dolphins opening day. David Woodley, I think they beat him 45-28 at Shea.
unbelievable,
Week
unbelievable loss.
week two they're playing in New England. In New England, they win the game, but Klecko gets hurt, like you said. And then we have the strike after that. We don't have football from the second week in September all the way to November. I don't think they started till after Thanksgiving. Maybe no, the week I think it was the week before Thanksgiving. They came back. They beat the Colts and they went on this run. They wind up getting in the playoffs. They wind up finishing 6-3. The only three losses they had all year. Think about this too with the Jets. That they lost twice to the Dolphins in the regular season, and the last game of the year they lost to the Chiefs in
Yeah,
Kansas City,
yeah.
and that cost them playing any playoff games at home. So they had to play that whole playoff run was on the road because of that.
Yeah, and that the late season loss to the Dolphins before the game-winning field goal at the end there, the
Right,
Jets had a chance at interception. I don't know if it was Holmes or Darrell Ray that
right,
had the
right.
ball right in their chest, and
Yep.
they couldn't hold on to it.
19-17 that
19
game
to
in
17
Miami.
game-winning field goal by, and that certainly would have changed things. And the divisional playoff game against the Bengals were coming in. They were expected to go back to the Super Bowl.
Well, they
Really,
were right. They were the defending AFC
yeah,
champions.
and that
And the Jets killed them. They blew them out
40 to
44-13.
7.
Freeman McNeil ran for 200 yards in that game.
Yep, and
And
that
he even
game,
threw a touchdown pass to Derek Gaffney as well. Option pass touchdown.
yeah.
They blew him out.
So the Jets are on a roll. They take care of the Bengals, and then they go to the Raiders.
Yeah.
And boy, that was a tough game. I remember Alzado ripping Cubby Ward's helmet right off of him. That was a tough game. And Todd was great, and the defense was great. Wesley Walker came out with a big play there.
Wasn't a touchdown, but he set up the touchdown with a long pass from Todd. But if you remember the end of the game, Jets won this game 17-14.
Lance
McNeil fumbles twice in the fourth quarter, and Lance Mel has 2 interceptions to save the game against Plunkett. 2 interceptions at the end to save the game. And you alluded to the Chris Ward, Lyle Alzado thing. Remember at halftime what happened when Walt Michaels gets this phone call right from some bartender in New York, and he thinks it's Al Davis calling him
playing games on him.
making whatever doing something crazy. I mean that it was unbelievable. That's one of the I did a list on my podcast. I did a list of the 10 greatest Jet wins of all time and the 10 worst Jet losses of all time. Okay. By the way, that Buffalo game made that top 10. But to me, the only wins in the history of the franchise that are better than that game against the Raiders in LA, it was in LA, 93,000 people in the Coliseum for that game was crazy. The only games I put ahead of that are the Super Bowl, Super Bowl III, the AFL title game against the Raiders, and the win over the Patriots in 2010 in Foxborough when they, beat Brady and Belichick in that playoff game before they lost to Pittsburgh. I would put that that Raider game is the next game.
Yeah, and that win over the Patriots. We're looking at that's almost 14 years ago, but we'll get to that.
That's
the last time I felt good.
That's the last time. That's the last playoff game they won, bro. That's the last time they were in the playoffs.
Oh, that's scary. So they take care of the Bengals, the 72 Bengals. The Raiders were 8-1 that year, and you're forgetting the following year they won the Super Bowl. The Raiders. So let's not forget about that. So 8-1.
Yep.
They go to Miami. The police get the police escort to the airport. And I remember the policeman saying, "We don't want to take any losers to the game." I remember seeing that on Channel 2 News. Mm-hmm. And you wake up on Sunday, and it was raining in the Northeast, and it was pouring in Miami, and the field is the quagmire, and that completely deflated the Jets.
Well, let's call it like it is. Don Shula, because it never rained. How do you not have a tarp at the Orange Bowl? It never rains in Southern California, Southern Florida, right?
Right.
South Florida never rains, okay? So how the hell do you not have a tarp? Shula did it on purpose. There's no doubt about it. Let's be honest. Shula was not, and I really believe this, Shula was not going to lose to the Jets again. He lost to them in the Super Bowl with the Colts, that disastrous, embarrassing loss for him. He wasn't going to let it happen again. He flooded the field and basically, took all our weapons away. McNeil running the ball, Wesley going down the field. and that really leveled the playing field because that Dolphin team, remember, David Woodley was the quarterback. Marino wasn't there yet. David Woodley was the quarterback. They were a pedestrian team, the killer bees on defense, and they basically ran the football. They were no kind of high-octane offense, and the Jets were. And that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what Shula did in that game. And, of course, Richard Todd had the meltdown. What can you say?
And if that instant replay in that game, there's a fumble by Andre Franklin that they didn't call a
Yes.
fumble, and
Yes.
the Jets would have got the ball. And that was a big play in that game.
Big play you're right. Big play in the game. 100%. Good call by you, Mike. That's right.
Yeah. So Wesley Walker couldn't get off the ground. They couldn't run the ball, and then. To be honest,
remember, it was no score at halftime. That game was
score.
0-0 at halftime.
But
I mean, it wasn't like Miami was doing anything offensively in that game either. I mean, and it came down to those interceptions. AJ Dewey.
Yeah, and that's a day AJ Dewey became a household name, and Dewey was getting pushed off the ball too. It wasn't like he was making the attacks. He was getting pushed off the line of scrimmage by the Jets' offensive line.
We had a great offensive line. I mean, come on, Marvin Powell, Chris Ward. I mean, we had Randy
Sweeney. Was Sweeney there yet? No, that was the last year.
I don't think Sweeney did. Joe Fields was the center. Joe Fields.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a good offensive line, man. They were good.
Yeah, and I remember just being deflated after that thing, and Klecko, and amazing though, the Klecko came back and actually played in those things. I mean, here's the guy that had a torn knee, busted up knee, and he came back that season. We're talking 40 years ago. That's pretty incredible that he even was able to take the field.
Well, let's fast forward to the '86 season when they start out 10-1 and they look like they're the dominant team in football. Now, Joe Walton was a terrible head coach. I mean, Joe Klecko. You talk to those guys on that team. Klecko has said it that Walton was terrible. But they were 10-1 that year. They were blowing people out, bro. You know that. O'Brien to Walker to Toon. They had a high-powered offense. McNeil, Johnny Hector is a backup, terrific player. Mickey Shula. They had an offense, right? I mean, they were burying people.
I remember that fall was the Mets were on fire. Won the World Series. The Jets were playing great. They were 10-1. Ken O'Brien was being named the MVP of the league. The Jets were going to the Super Bowl, and then all the injuries happened, and the team got down.
Injuries happened. They lost the whole defensive line. And look, even with that, this team, we know how that year ended. They lose the last 5 games of the regular season, right? They come back, they beat the Chiefs in that playoff game, 35-15.
I was there for that. I was there for that game.
Yep, absolutely. Remember, Pat Ryan started that game. O'Brien didn't even start that game.
No.
And then they blow the game in Cleveland. They're up 20-10 with 5 minutes to go, and they choke that game away and lose in double overtime.
Charlie Steiner had it. The Jets are going to the AFC Championship. Yeah, I remember picking up my father saying we're going to the AFC Championship, and the Jets had the Broncos number. They had beaten them earlier in the year that year on the Monday Night Football.
Monday night game. And, it's interesting because I was at that Monday night game,
Me
and
too.
that was a crazy week for me because let me just tell you this: Monday night, I'm at the Meadowlands for that Jet blowout of the Broncos. Tuesday night, I'm in Fenway Park for Game 3 of the World Series with the Mets, Lenny Dykstra leading off with the home run against Oil Can Boyd, right? Saturday night, I'm at Shea Stadium for the Bill Buckner game.
Oh, wow.
And then hours later, I'm at the Jet game against the Saints at the Meadowlands. Jets win, and Lance Mel tears up his knee.
And that was it. And that was it for Lance. But boy, that Lance Mel injury was a big loss. They had
huge. Right.
Huge. And I remember watching the game on television, and John Madden had said the Jets right now are the class of the AFC.
Yeah.
And that's for John Madden to say that. So those Jet teams.
But they lost the whole defense, bro. They lost. Mel went down. The entire defensive line went down. Gastineau, I guess, and Lions were back for the Cleveland playoff game. By the way, I want to throw this out there too. Right. I'm trying to get on it now that we got Joe in the Hall of Fame. Okay. Isn't it time to start looking at Gastineau as a Hall of Famer?
Well, I was going to talk about that. I looked up his stats. He had 107.5 sacks and 107 starts. Who does that?
Bro,
20 sacks in 81, 19 in 83, and 22 in 84. For 5 years, he was the best defensive end player, best defensive player on the line. If you go, what Joe Green had the 70s, and Bruce Smith came along in the 80s, late 80s with Reggie White and everything. But for 5 years, Gastineau and Klecko are probably the best defensive linemen in football.
There's no question about it. And Gastineau belongs in the Hall of Fame, bro. Let's be honest. He had a bad rap because of the sack dance, okay? And now everybody does. Now, Mike, Everybody, some rookie gets his first sack. He never played before, and he's doing a backflip after that, right? So you got to look at that too with Gastineau. He basically invented the sack dance, and now everybody does it. So look, and the idea that Gastineau couldn't play the run was BS, man. He
was
watch
triple
games,
teamed. He was triple
bro, but
teamed
he
most of
goes
the time.
sideline to sideline. You watch the speed of this guy going sideline to sideline to nail ball carriers. Gastineau, Joe certainly was the man. He's the number one guy in that line. Gastineau's got to get in the Hall of Fame. Gastineau's right there. He's one of the great elite passers. Remember, he had the record until Strahan broke it. How many years did he have that record?
A faux break. Yeah,
well,
yeah,
Brett
that
Favre
was
lied
a
down
faux
for the
break.
record.
But getting 20 sacks was like hitting 60 home runs back then. This guy did it 3 times pretty much.
Right. Yep.
So he needs to be recognized for that. And I'm glad you brought that up.
It's time to get Gastineau in the Hall of Fame now. Before he dies, before he's had his issues.
Yeah, he's not well. He's not well.
No, right.
I spoke to him a few years ago actually on the phone.
He's not right. That's right.
And he's not right. So those Jets teams again, aren't appreciated the way that they should be really from the 1980s, because they were on the verge of going to the Super Bowl a couple of times. Some great teams there. Why do you think it took so long for Klecko to be recognized? Is it because they didn't win the big games?
Yeah, because the Jets never won. I mean, he wasn't on any championship teams. I mean, I think that's really, really what it comes down to. You look at these guys that played on, and think about this too, okay? And this is another reason to me why Gastineau again should be in the Hall of Fame. But I think it goes back to, because, like I said, he never won anything. But how many defensive lines have their own name, right? Whether it was the
Fearsome
the
Foursome
with
defense,
the Rams, the Purple People Eaters with the Vikings,
Curtain.
Doomsday, right? Steel Curtain with Pittsburgh, Doomsday. With the Cowboys, and the Jets had the sack exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of it's a household name if you know football. If you know the great defensive lines of all time, they're right there. But they didn't win.
Not for nothing. I mean, why is it taking so long for the NFL to do a football life with Joe Klecko or Mark Gastineau?
Right. Yeah.
They haven't been.
They're finally getting the recognition they deserve. I think you got a lot of people now. I know Gary Myers was instrumental in pushing Klecko to get in. He did a great job doing that. He wrote all those years for the Daily News. And he did a great job. But I think maybe finally, look, the guy was an All-Pro, not just a Pro Bowler, All-Pro at 3 different positions. I mean, nobody else did that. Who else did that? Nobody.
And you would think of Joe Klecko too. Let's not forget about the Smokey and the Bandit movies in the 1970s with Burt Reynolds.
Right. And he's a great guy. Joe's a great guy. I know him personally. Like I said, I'm going to Canton. I'm going to go see, as a fan. And remember, Darrelle Revis is going in too. So we got a couple guys going in. Probably the 2 greatest defensive players in the history of the Jets. I guess it's questionable with Revis and Gastineau, who's number 2, but he's right up there. There's no doubt about it.
What do you think Joe would have been like if they had the Giants? Like if Klecko played with the Giants, how would he be looked at today?
Forget it. He would have been in the Hall of Fame years ago. You would have been looking at him, playing in front of LT and all of that. Forget about it. How much better would they have been? Leonard Marshall was a terrific player. Jim Burt was a real good player. Guys like that. They were good. Eric Howard. They were good players. But this guy put Klecko there. Leonard Marshall, terrific player, but he wasn't Joe Klecko. Now you put Klecko in front of Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks and Harry Carson and those guys. Come on, I don't have to tell you.
So you've been semi-retired for a couple of years now. After
about 3 years now.
A Jets loss or a Mets loss or something going on with you. Do you crave to get in front of that microphone?
No, because I do Saturdays now. I do the Saturday show on the Fan 10 to 1, and I got a lot. I do a podcast twice a week, Monday and Friday. And, people still look for me with the Jets. I was doing a spot last year with Tierney and Tiki when they was together last year every Monday after Jet games. I think I'm going to be doing something with Evan this year. And I get, Evan and Tiki now on a Monday after Jet games. When it comes to the Jets, like I said, I was SNY asked me. I was very happy that I was involved in the 73, the Joe Klecko documentary that SNY did. I was a big part of that. I guess I'm always going to be synonymous with the Jets. I even got a pretty good relationship with Salah, to be honest with you. We're
Oh,
supposed to play
wow.
golf within the next coming week, so hopefully that's going to go down. We'll see.
Hopefully he has a better year coaching the team than he did last year.
He
So a lot,
better.
lot, lot of
Hey, look,
mistakes.
here's the bottom line, Mike. Look, and I'm with you. The jury's still out on the coach. Here's the
Yep.
bottom line. They got the quarter. They got a 2-year window now with Aaron Rodgers. They got to win now. If they don't win the Super Bowl in the next 2 years, when are we winning, bro? When?
We're
Who's
not.
our quarterback after Rodgers? It's now or never. We got the team. We got a solid defense, right? We got all these weapons on offense now. Hopefully, Brees Hall's back. I don't know if he's going to be 100%. It took Barkley a couple of years to get back with the same injury. We'll see. But they got a lot of offensive weapons now. You got a Hall of Fame quarterback that can still play. Let's be honest, he can still play even at 38. And here's the thing with Rodgers. Because people say to me, well, Brett Favre. Here's the difference. Rodgers wants to be here. Brett Favre didn't want to be here. He wanted to play for the Vikings. The Packers traded him to the Jets. He had no say in it. And after that first year, he couldn't wait to get the hell out of New York and get to Minnesota. This guy wants to be here, and he's embraced being here. And I think Rodgers realizes if I win a Super Bowl with the Jets, I'm a Hall of Fame quarterback now. But if I win a Super Bowl with the Jets, I go to a different level. He becomes something different if he slayed the 55-year dragon of no championship,
Well, no one bleeds green more than you do, Joe. And why is it, do you think that the fans still connect to you and there's the hunger for you that they feel such a connection to you? Why do you think the
Well, you know
listeners
what?
love it?
I just think it's because I'm a fan. I mean, what you see is what you get. This is my team. I live and die with these guys, man. I mean, I'm waiting a long time. I was fortunate enough to see Super Bowl III. I was 15 years old, but I look back at it now, I started rooting for the Jets in 65, Namath's rookie year. I got hooked in by Joe Willie. My father actually, he exposed me to Namath at Alabama. Okay. When he was playing there, I was 10, 11, whatever it was. You got to see this kid, white shoes, this quarterback from Alabama. And then he winds up in New York. Oh, wow, this is my guy. This is my team. Right. That was great. 1965, they win the Super Bowl 4 years later. I'm like, wow, we're going to be good forever. Right. And we know what happened.
Yep.
And, and so I was a 15-year-old. It was great, but there's no way I appreciated that Super Bowl win like I would now. I was a 15-year-old kid. I'm going to be 70 this year, and I still haven't seen my team back in a Super Bowl. Please. It's like the Holy Grail. It's beyond the Holy Grail now, Mike. It's beyond the Holy Grail.
I don't have any memories of Namath actually playing with the Jets. My memory of him is with the Rams on that Monday night game. And
what did the Jets? His last game. That was
ugly,
the last game of his career against the Bears. He was terrible.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, he is the WFAN legend, Joe Benigno, talking Joe Klecko. Joe, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Mike, it's always a pleasure anytime. And let's go Jets. And if you get a chance, get out to Canton and go see Joe get inducted. God bless.